Good day, beautiful people. This is Natalie Silva with Life Treasures and Golden Moments. Welcome back to my podcast. As you know, I always share stories of miracles and stories of inspiration. Today, I would like to share a story with you about angels. It was said one time by Francis de Sales, "Make yourself familiar with the angels and behold them frequent in spirit, for without being seen, they are present with you." Today's story was authored by Diana MacDonald, and it's called The Seashell. Our trip to Nags Head, North Carolina, late in August of 1993, was to be a getaway for my husband John, our 11-year-old son Brian, and me. We invited Gretchen, my childhood friend, and her family. Not long after we arrived at the beachfront hotel, Gretchen suggested we take a walk, just the two of us. That walk changed my life forever. Gretchen sensed something was troubling me. We had a friendship that went way back to our schoolgirl days, and we could talk to each other about anything. We skipped shells through crashing waves as we walked. I wanted 2 children, Gretch, but nothing has helped the operations, the fertility drugs. It was a miracle I was able to have Brian. Gretchen bounded away from an advancing wave. "Don't despair," she said. "You still have time. You're only 39 years old." As the tide drifted away from the sand, we both reached for a shell that had washed in, and I picked it up, and Gretchen stepped closer to inspect my find. I opened my hand, and she turned the shell over in my palm. We gasped. Etched in the shell was the image of an angel. Nestled in its arms was a baby. "I've seen lots of shells," Gretchen said, "but never one with an angel cradling a baby." I wrapped my fingers around the 6-inch long shell and drew it closer to my chest. The shell found its place on my nightstand back home in Connecticut. Each night I held it and felt it in the texture of the etching as I prayed to have just one more child. Other images came alive on the shell. The face of Jesus looking down on a baby in a cradle, a dove above the angel's head. Early one Wednesday evening in October, I received a phone call. "Mrs. MacDonald?" a young girl asked. "We have never met, but my Aunt Doris used to work for you. Doris Scott." I remember Doris fondly. She had worked in a gift shop John and I had owned right around the time I started trying to get pregnant again. I had confided in Doris my longing for another baby. "Of course, I remember Doris," I said. "It's all right." "Yes, but that's not why I'm calling." The girl then related that she was 17, single, living in Texas, and 5 months pregnant. "I think you had better sit down for the rest of what I have to tell you," she warned. Was this a prank call? No, something told me I needed to hear this girl out. "I know you don't know me," she began, "but please believe what I am about to say." Her name was Stephanie, and she claimed to have something like a dream the night before. The dream concerned her unborn child. "You see, an angel came to me," she told me. "I was having a baby for a woman who couldn't. The angel said I would know when I had found the right woman because we were born in the same town, and she was an adopted baby herself." My face flushed. "Yes, I was adopted." "Yes, Stephanie, I was. When I was 4 months old. But I wasn't born here in Connecticut or in Texas. I was born in Syracuse, New York." There was silence on the other end. Stephanie, are you there?" "Mrs. MacDonald," she broke in. "I was born in Syracuse, too. I moved to Texas last year." I felt as though the wind had been knocked out of me. This couldn't be happening. "You have to believe me, Mrs. MacDonald. This baby is for you. The angel promised it would be a little girl in your likeness." The conversation with Stephanie was too much for me to absorb. Her mother got on the phone and assured me that she would be along with Stephanie's plan to give up the baby. I told Stephanie's mother I needed time to think all this over and talk to my family. Then Stephanie got back on the line. "Please call by Sunday," she begged. "I'll feel better once I know your answer." I hung up tears trickling down my cheeks. Sunday was only 4 days away. How would I begin to tell my husband? What would my son think? I couldn't make any sense of this. Stephanie's voice was that of a child, yet her words were spoken confidently. But what if she decided to keep the baby at the last moment? I would not be able to stand the pain if she changed her mind. That evening, John, Brian, and I had a long talk. On Saturday night, the three of us wandered around the mall. We found ourselves pricing cribs and strollers, and John admitted he had already looked at minivans. Brian said he was tired of being an only child. I'm all for the baby, as long as I don't have to change diapers, he announced. Sunday came too fast. John kept saying, follow your heart. But when I picked up the phone to call Stephanie, a lump formed in my throat and tears started. I streaked to our second-floor bedroom, careful not to let Brian or John see me cry. I sat on the edge of the bed, sobbing and repeating over and over, follow your heart. As I looked down into my lap, I felt a gentle hand on my cheek and realized John must have heard me crying. I smiled up at him, but no one was there. I put my own hand to my cheek, which seemed to be wiped dry. As my hand dropped from my face, I focused on the shell pierced on the nightstand. Follow your heart. I ran downstairs and dialed as fast as I could. Hello, Stephanie? Yes. I want this baby with all my heart. Although we bought a crib and baby things immediately, we left them in their boxes with receipts taped on them. The ritual seemed to be our only defense if something went wrong. Despite the results of an ultrasound scan showing our baby was to be a boy, Stephanie insisted it was a girl. Remember, she told me, the angel said so. Girl or boy, I didn't care. Getting a second child was enough. But in December, John and I discovered a stumbling block. Local attorneys, one after the other, said an open adoption outside the state of Connecticut would be next to impossible. After a week of research, John called social services. The head coordinator said the adoption would be extremely difficult, but gave John the name of an attorney who might be able to help us. Once again, in the mood at home, it changed as the three of us stood over the baby's crib, changing table and toys. We had come so far with our plans. Now we were going to be told we could only adopt through an agency. John ran his fingers over the spindles of the unassembled crib. Nothing is going to stop us, Diana. We have an angel on our side. The next day, we got an emergency appointment with an attorney. It's not going to be easy, he said. There's a minor birth mother involved, and her consent is an issue. Then there's the transfer of the minor's baby from one state to another. On top of all the legal issues, you need to be approved by social services, which means a social worker will have to come to your home right away. A few days later, the social worker arrived. During our initial meeting, she let John and me know she did not like open adoptions, and for the coming weeks, we were at her disposal. Brian was interviewed alone. John and I were required to have individual meetings. We had to have criminal records checks and pass a nationwide social service clearance. We needed to provide years of W-2 forms, our marriage certificate, personal references, daily schedules. The list went on and on and on. As February drew close, we began to finalize our plans. A few days before Stephanie's due date, John and Brian pulled the crib from its half-open box and assembled it. Brian contributed his baby pillow, and the study was transformed into a nursery. A friend who worked for an airline gave us 2 standby tickets. We had it all arranged. John would stay home with Brian, and Gretchen would fly with me to get the baby. Our bags were packed and ready. Each time the phone rang, I jumped. Finally, we got the call. It's time, John blurted out. Stephanie's in labor. Call Gretchen and let's go. Both of us knew the plane schedule by heart. A flight would leave in 40 minutes. I have to get you 2 on that plane, John said. The drive to the airport was nerve-wracking, but we made it in time. The agent who reviewed our standby tickets assured me we would have no problem securing seats. I was beginning to panic. If I get on the plane, I won't know if the baby is delivered safe and sound, I told John. What if something happens? He had already pulled our calling card from his wallet and headed toward the payphones 20 feet away. I watched his expression from where I stood, frozen. Was he talking to an operator? Did he reach the hospital? He looked so serious. As much as I yearned to hear what he was saying, I couldn't move. After months of sleepless nights full of anticipation, we would know soon if our baby was healthy. John's hand went up, motioning for me to come over to the telephone. My knees began to shake, but I forced myself to walk. I took the receiver from his hand. Hello? Stephanie's cousin was on the other end. Your daughter is waiting for you, she said. The flight seemed endless as I stared into the empty infant carrier on the seat beside me. It was hard to imagine that in a few hours the carrier would have my new baby daughter in it, and Gretchen and I took several curious passengers and the whole crew about our mission. By the time we landed, everyone had given us our best wishes. During the taxi ride to the hospital, I found myself once again explaining the empty baby seat, this time to the cab driver. I had seen his eyes lower to my abdomen as I struggled into the taxi with the carrier and said, "To the hospital, please." Gretchen and I chuckled as we watched the cabbie's eyebrows rise. "I'll be here waiting when you come out," our driver friend promised when we pulled up to the hospital entrance, "no matter how long it takes." The minute we entered the lobby, a woman walked right up to us and introduced herself as a social worker in charge of completing the paperwork. "Before we get started, there is someone waiting here to meet you," she said with a smile. She led us into the nursery and pointed to a bassinet with a huge pink bow. Surrounding the bassinet stood a crowd of nurses and 2 doctors. The room was suddenly silent. All eyes followed me as I took a first look at my daughter. Her hands reached out in reflex as I stroked her soft arm with my fingers. She looked like a china doll with blonde hair. I was speechless. The head nurse put a towel on my shoulder and handed my daughter to me. I pulled my hand gently on the back of her head. A warm feeling took over my entire body. "I can't believe Stephanie was right," the obstetrician said, "but this baby is definitely a girl." The social worker escorted Gretchen and me to a side room where I spent my first moments feeding my beautiful baby and rocking her to sleep. I wanted never to let go of her. The social worker soon returned and quietly informed us we had to get to work, but first someone else would like to say hello. We walked down the hallway to Stephanie's hospital room, and I peeked inside the door. There she lay, hooked up to her cardiac monitor and intravenous tubing. She had a long labor that ended with a C-section, the social worker whispered. "But she'll be fine." Stephanie's eyes were partially closed. "I told you it was a girl," she said. I walked over and slid a stuffed teddy bear under Stephanie's arm. "How do I say thank you?" "You just said it. You're here." After a whirlwind of paperwork, we prepared to leave the hospital. On the way out, a nurse approached me in the hallway and pulled me aside. "I was in the delivery room," she said, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. "Something happened in there, Mrs. McDonald. I was afraid to tell anyone. I'm a professional person. But when I learned you were adopting the baby, I knew I had to tell you." "Oh no," I thought. "Is this all too good to be true? What happened in the delivery room? Please, please," I said, "please tell me." When the doctor handed the newborn baby to me, the nurse stopped and took a long look at me. "I saw an angel," she whispered, "right there in the delivery room, standing there just as plain as day, an angel." "Thank you," I said, and hugged her. "You're not the only one who has seen an angel with this baby." Our cab driver was waiting outside as promised. He smiled like a doting uncle at the now-filled baby carrier. The return flight with Gretchen and the baby will stay with me forever. When we arrived home in Connecticut, the looks on the faces of John and Brian as we were united for the first time as a family made all of our struggles worth it. 2 years have passed since Maddie came into our lives, and she is truly a blessing. She has sparkling turquoise eyes and flowing platinum hair. Hardly a day goes by that a stranger doesn't go out of their way to comment on how much she looks like me. When Maddie is old enough, I will tell her the story of the shell. I will tell her she was sent by an angel as an answer to our prayers, a promise on a seashell fulfilled. This is Natalie Silva with Life Treasures and Golden Moments. Thank you for listening today. And until next time, take care, have a beautiful week, and may God bless.